Let's discuss the spinal cord. So there are about 31 pairs of spinal nerves, which leads to the foramina in the vertebral column. These are 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal. There are 8 cervical nerves and only 7 cervical vertebrae. So that is a point to consider. And there is 1 coccygeal nerve and 4 coccygeal vertebrae. If we look at this diagram, then this is the cross section of a spinal cord which has been cut. So here we can see that this is the posterior root and this is the anterior root, and this is the postganglionic neuron, and afferent fibers are going to carry impulses towards the CNS, and the anterior root is the motor portion and the posterior root is the sensory portion, and the anterior root is going to carry the nerve fibers away from the CNS. So you can remember A for anterior and A for away. Such are the efferent fibers. So these are the efferent fibers. So impulse is going to travel from the dorsal root towards the anterior root. So efferents are going to travel towards the skeletal muscle fibers, and then they are going to innervate the motor fibers from the anterior gray horn of the spinal cord. The cell bodies of the nerve fibers are in the posterior root ganglion. So here we can see the posterior root ganglion, and the spinal nerve roots and the respective foramina are going to constitute the spinal nerve, which is a mixed nerve. It has both sensory and motor fibers. So till the 3rd month of IUL, or the intrauterine life, there's going to be proportionate growth of the spinal cord. However, after that, the disproportionate growth is going to take place in the length of the spinal cord with respect to the length of the vertebral column with respect to the spinal cord. So the length of the root is going to increase from above downwards, and the upper cervical region has the spinal nerve roots shorter and horizontal. The roots of lumbar and sacral nerves below the level of the termination of the spinal cord will form a vertical leash of nerves around the filum terminale. Together, the lumbar and the sacral lower nerve roots are called the chorda equina. So this is the definition of chorda equina. After the intervertebral foramen, the spinal nerve is going to give us a large anterior ramus and a smaller posterior ramus. The large anterior ramus has mixed fibers, and it is going to supply the muscles and the skin of the anterolateral body wall and the limbs. And the smaller posterior ramus has mixed fibers, and it is going to supply the skin of the back and the muscles. The anterior rami will join one another at the root of the limbs. They're going to form complicated nerve plexuses. As we know that cervical and brachial plexus are of the upper limb and sacral and lumbar plexuses are of the lower limb. If we talk about the ganglia, then we have 2 types of ganglia, sensory ganglia and autonomic ganglia. Autonomic ganglia are going to be irregular in shape. They are along the course of the efferent nerve fibers of the autonomic nervous system, and they are present in the paravertebral synthetic chains and around the roots of the greater visual arteries in the abdomen and close to the walls of the various viscera or embedded in them. If we talk about the sensory ganglia, then they are fusiform swellings, and they are on the posterior root ganglion, like the 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10 cranial nerves, which are sensory ganglia of these neurons. Let's talk about the spinal cord in more detail now. So spinal cord is going to be cylindrical in shape, and it begins superiorly at the foramen magnum in the skull, and it is continuous with the medulla oblongata of the brain. It is going to terminate at the level of L1 in adults and at the level of L3 in children. It has 3 layers. One is the dura mater, then the arachnoid mater, and then the innermost is the pia mater. CSF is going to protect the spinal cord and surround the spinal cord in the subarachnoid space. If we talk about the cervical region, then the cervical region is going to give origin to the brachial plexus, and the lower thoracic and the lumbar regions are going to give rise to the lumbosacral plexus. In the lumbosacral plexus, the spinal cord is going to be enlarged, and cervical and lumbar enlargements are going to be formed. Inferiorly, the spinal cord is going to taper off into the conus medullaris. From the apex of the conus medullaris, a prolongation of the pia mater, which is the filum terminale, is going to descend to the posterior surface of the coccyx. Here we can see the cross section of the spinal cord. So this is the anterior median fissure, with basically a deep longitudinal fissure, and this is a shallow furrow, which is also known as a posterior median sulcus. So each root is attached to the spinal cord by a series of rootlets which extend the whole length of the spinal cord. And the posterior root ganglion has cells which give rise to the peripheral and the central nerve fibers. So here I have shown the 3 layers of the spinal cord. This is the dura mater, this is the arachnoid mater, and this is the pia mater. So as we can see here that the pia mater is going to continue as the filum terminale at the level of the coccyx. Now let's discuss the structure of the spinal cord. So here we can see that this is the outer white matter, and this is the inner gray matter. And this is the central canal, which is formed by the ependymal cells. So inner core of the gray matter has neuronal cell body. That is why the color is gray. And the outer matter is going to be white due to the presence of the nerve fibers. And the inner core of the gray matter is going to be H-shaped pillar or butterfly shaped. And it has anterior and posterior gray horns or gray columns. And it is united by a single gray commissure, which is containing the central canal. A small lateral gray horn is present in the thoracic or lumbar segments of the spinal cord. So here is a point of remembering. Amount of the gray matter depends on the amount of the muscle which is present. and greatest size within the cervical and lumbocervical enlargement of the spinal cord. The cervical region of the spinal cord is going to be oval, and it is going to be round in the thoracic region, and it is going to be pyramidal in the lumbar region. Now let's talk about the white matter. The white matter is made up of a mixture of nerve fibers, neuroglia, and blood vessels. It has high proportion of myelinated nerve fibers, that is why it is white. And anterior, lateral, and posterior white columns are present, or funiculi. They are also known as the funiculi. So basically, this portion is the funiculus, and this portion is the funiculus. This portion is the funiculus. This portion is the funiculus. Anterior column is present between the midline and the point of emergence of the anterior nerve roots, and the lateral column is between the emergence of the anterior nerve roots and the entry of the posterior nerve roots. And posterior column is present between the entry of the posterior nerve roots and the midline. White matter is going to occupy upper two-thirds of the vertebral canal of the vertebral column, and it is surrounded by dura mater, arachnoid matter, and pia mater. So here we can see the foramen magnum, and it is going to continue as the medulla oblongata and then the spinal cord. The endosteal layer is only present in the foramen magnum, and it does not enter the spinal cord. It does not extend towards the spinal cord. Meningeal layer is going to extend towards the spinal cord only. So this you have to remember. Okay. The spinal cord has an epidural space, which is also known as the extradural space. This extradural space is present between the dura mater and the osteoligamentous structure, which is lining the vertebral canal. The spinal cord is basically from the CNS, but the spinal cord nerves are from the peripheral nervous system. And epineurium means the dura mater and the arachnoid mater. So here we can see the structure of the spinal cord. This is the epineurium, this is the fasciculus, and this is the endoneurium or the pia mater. The dura mater and meninges have different extensions, and the meninges are not going to end at L1. They're going to extend furthermore. Dura mater and arachnoid mater is going to continue till S2, and dura and arachnoid mater are going to end at the conus medullaris, and the pia mater is going to end at L1 or the coccyx, which is basically the phylum terminale. Now let's talk about the pia mater. Pia mater is basically the vascular layer. It extends from the brain to the spinal cord. It is going to enclose the nerves, and it is a portion of endoneurium, and spinal nerves are going to contain the blood vessels and fasciculi. Also, fifth layer of the scalp has dura mater and ostial or periosteal layer. Spinal cord meninges. Let's talk about the meninges now. So here we have the dura mater. It is basically a very dense, strong fibrous membrane which is going to enclose the spinal cord and the chorda equina. This is continuous above through the foramen magnum and inferiorly ends at the phylum terminale at the lower border of the S2. Dural sheath is going to lie loosely in the vertebral canal, and it is separated from it by the extradural space, which is extradural space is loose areolar tissue, the internal vertebral venous plexus, LI. It becomes continuous with the connective tissue surrounding each spinal nerve or the epineurium. Inner surface is in contact with the arachnoid mater and arachnoid matter. Arachnoid matter is going to be continuous above throughout the foramen magnum, and it is made up of delicate impermeable membrane. It is present between the pia and dura mater, as we already know, and it is separated with the help of subarachnoid matter from the pia mater. And the connective tissues are going to cross it. Inferiorly, it is going to end at the level of phylum terminale at the level of S2, and it is going to form small lateral extensions of the subarachnoid space. Now let's talk about the pia mater. It has a vascular membrane, and it is thickened on either side to form a ribbon-like ligamentum denticulum, which laterally passes and adheres to the arachnoid and the dura mater, which are the first two layers. That is how the spinal cord is suspended in the middle of the dural sheath. The pia mater is going to extend with the connective tissue surrounding each spinal nerve.